So let me just get this out of the way. I love you.
Thank you.
The tide is turning. How does it feel to look back at people, and we forget, people like Gwede Mantashe, Lindiwe Sisulu, who rubbished the Nkandla report, the Minister of Defense who called you a CIA spy. Okay, we're not going to deal with crazy here today, but let's talk about Ms. Mantashe and Lindiwe Sisulu. Have they apologized?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, Mr. Mantashe somehow apologized. He stated in August 2016 that as the ANC, they had always agreed with what my team and I were saying privately, although publicly they had a different narrative. He also said that several times I had saved them from themselves.
Wow.
And that was in August 2016.
Okay, all right. So that's something. So clearly you had the courage to say what other people were thinking but were not willing to say.
I would say so. And again, I wouldn't say I personally alone was a crusader for the truth. I was fortunate to be a member of a team that understood that it had a particular role, that it was there appointed to support and strengthen constitutional democracy, and that was going to be done whether there was approval or no approval.
How do you see your role? How did you see your role? You've spoken about voice of the people,
Yes.
conscience of their leaders. Do you still see it that way?
That's interesting, Justin. We changed our minds halfway through the process. Yes, when I started as a public protector, I said to Parliament, and we said, so as a team, that we're going to be the voice of the people. We give people a voice and the leaders a conscience, like Emma Katsi. We did a little bit of that, but in the end, we discovered that really people have their own voice, and it's best when they use that voice. And as a public protector, you're not really a voice of the people, you are an enabler, helping people to use their own voices. And what saved us as the public protector was the fact that people claimed their voices and they used that voice. So you think about Nkandla, we created a bit of the game, and the goal scorers with the people of South Africa.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting perspective on what you do, because one thinks of you as being the champion going out there, but actually you enabled people to speak up, and people did. They started really speaking up and getting out there and doing actually a lot of the work that you had started, you and your team.
Ultimately, which really is part of democracy, because democracy is essentially about people governing themselves. They do so through public representatives, and that's the nature of the architecture of democracy. But the real governors are the people. And over the years, I think the people of South Africa, and possibly people all over the world, had some subcontracted democracy to lawyers and politicians.
So we need to take our voices back. What do you say to someone out there who is aware that there's wrongdoing going on and they're scared? They're scared. Listen, your life was at stake. At one point, I mean, your reputation was at stake. You were being slandered. That's people. We see things moving in the right direction now. But to somebody else there who's scared of that happening to them, how do they summon that courage?
I would say to a person, yes, you have a right to be scared, but something greater is at stake, and that do it in the interest of democracy, and that's how a lot of the whistleblowers think about these things. I remember, for example, one whistleblower at a province who was the CFO in that particular department was fired because she wouldn't allow tenders and contracts that were improper. And the way she thought about it was her daughters, that she wanted to create a particular society where her daughters and her daughters' children were living in a country that was properly governed. And she took the blows for that. And fortunately, although she came to us 2 years down the line, we were able to help her. And she's back at work today. And after having been out of work for quite some time, after having been insulted, vilified, and all sorts of things.
Now that's really interesting. It reminds me of some research that's come out on the pay gap between men and women. As we know, it is still a significant gap all over the world. One of the reasons given, and it's not the only reason, but one of them is that women don't ask for raises to the same degree that men do. They don't persist unless they're told to think of that pay rise in terms of the good that it can do for their family and community. Once they start to think about their family and community, they then will go on and at the same rate as men. So men kind of, it's a stereotype, but are kind of thinking me. But if women start to think of their communities, then they may be willing to do the tough things, right? I just rubbished my entire gender, but the guys will forgive me.
Well, yes, the guys have to forgive us, but it's true. One of the experiences I've heard in working with women is that if it's about power and self-aggrandizement or self-promotion, they're not likely to step up. If it's about responsibility and saving a family, saving a community, the women will be up there. It's almost sometimes you would want to frame it that way in order to get women to appreciate that it's time for them to lead, because at the end of the day, they do tend to live with a greater understanding of social justice and a greater commitment to the notion of Ubuntu, which Ubuntu is not really an airy-fairy, tree-hugging approach to life. It's really about understanding that our humanity is intertwined, and my own humanity is defined by yours. If I protect you, if I improve your fortunes, my own fortunes are going to be improved. So women do tend to be more like that. But again, we don't want to overgeneralize that men can be like that. And somebody has written a book called Jesus CEO that says Jesus used both his feminine style and also his masculine style, and you need both depending on the circumstances.
You have seen some of the worst of human behavior. What is, having seen what you've seen, I mean, are you hopeful?
Very. I am very hopeful. I think all of us in this room are very hopeful now.
From last week, yes.
There's a glimmer of hope that things are happening, and I've always believed that the truth tends to be less agile than lies, but eventually the truth wins. And we just have to hang in there, and you just have to trust that if you do the right thing and think about not just today, think about tomorrow, think about 2 years down the line, 5 years down the line, and think about 20 years down the line and the future, things are going to be okay.
Well, you know, what you say reminds me of Martin Luther King, who said the arc of the moral universe bends slowly, I think he said, towards justice. So it's been slow, this moral arc in South Africa, but you think it's going in the right direction?
It is going in the right direction, and not just here in South Africa. The arc of the moral universe does tend to be slow, but it always bends towards justice. And that's been the case whether we're dealing with Nazism, dealing with racism, dealing with gender inequality, slavery, etc. But we have to work for it. And looking forward, it's going to be important that we are grateful that finally we can see that there's no impunity, that good people are able to work and invest knowing that they are not going to be undermined by people who get away with murder or who get away with wrongdoing. But let's otherwise though focus on other things, on innovation, on building a society of our dreams, of building an Africa and world of our dreams.
You know, I did a conference in Turkey. They've got a saying there, the fish rots from the head down. And what they mean is that culture is largely determined by leadership, right? And so you can, and I actually have a client in the audience who I will not pick out, but who runs a major business, one of the biggest retail businesses on this continent, who would say that about 10% of people will never steal, about 10% of people will always steal, And about 80% of people can go either way,
Wow.
depending on their culture, depending on the culture of the business. And literally in their business, they found they replaced leadership. People who were stealing are now, they have the lowest stock losses and are not stealing at all. The same people.
I truly believe that. I think I tweeted a few days ago that the body of the temperature of a body is set from the head, and the society's culture, values, and behavior are determined by the leadership of that society. And from our side, we think that leadership and that culture should not just be integrity in terms of not stealing. For me, I like the UN approach, the UN Global Compact and the UN Sustainable Development Goals, that in building integrity, we also build the idea of social justice. We also build the idea of understanding that I can't cheat you and hope to build a better society. If I cheat you, you're going to cheat someone else. We create that kind of culture where we cheat each other. So it's not just about stealing. It's just about making sure that as businesses we stand upright. We don't cheat Gogo Dlamini. We don't cheat government. We don't cheat anyone. We work together to create a better society, which is integrate leadership, integrity, and social justice.
And it's a timely message. This is not just about government. This is about the private sector. We've seen some scandals just recently, and you are now coming in. Many of the people in this room are looking to bring you into their business communities. And what is your message? What would be your message to them?
Well, I would say let's key into the UN Global Compact. Let's key into the Sustainable Development Goals in our country's national development plan, and build that kind of society where integrity is at the core and social justice is at the core. And then we work together to enable everyone else to flourish. From my side, I should also mention that at Stellenbosch, we're starting this movement around social justice, and we're using 2018 to work primarily with young people to say, what kind of society do you want to live in? And whatever kind of society you want to live in, you are the first person to build that society.
Isn't Ubuntu good business?
Ubuntu is excellent business.
I have one final question because our time is up. Advocate, when are you running for president?
Certainly, that's one area where I am not interested. But I am willing to work with presidents, with wannabe presidents, which I hope everyone should want to be a president, because all of us in Greece, everyone was a politician. Civil society is political society. So I'm here to build civil society through the Social Justice Project and through the Tuma Foundation or Thuli Madonsela Foundation. We're inculcating a culture of what we call epic leadership, which is bold leaders that are ethical, purpose-driven, impact-conscious, and committed to serve.
Advocate, I know that I can say on behalf of every person in this room, we are so deeply grateful for the work that you've done for this country. Thank you.
It's a privilege. Thank you.